Angry MGTOW here, and today I'm joined yet again by Roaming Millennial. We're going to be discussing feminism, gender politics, MGTOW, and pretty much what else comes to mind.
Angry McTow
Oh,
here, and
God.
today I'm joined yet again by Roaming Millennial. We're going to
Just love that it just started in the background. Okay, so I just fixed that. All right, so we're going to discuss gender politics, MGTOW, feminism, whatever else comes to mind. So thank you, Roaming, for coming on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Okay. So the last time you were on, I think we kind of had a little bit of a fight, didn't we?
A little bit. I don't think it was a fight, except for some words that were said, but overall, just very strong disagreement.
Okay. So hopefully we can kind of sort that out and and talk a little bit more, just casually today. That's the whole idea. So one thing that I wanted to start off with is just discussing what MGTOW is very quickly because there's so many people that have their own definitions of MGTOW, and I think that I did a little bit of a disservice to MGTOW when I discussed MGTOW because I should have simply said to you that MGTOW is just not getting married, not having children in the traditional sense. So, for example, using surrogates is fine, but having children in the traditional sense, going and having a baby with a woman traditionally is not something a MGTOW would do. Instead, focusing on yourself and your own passions, that's MGTOW. With that said, that doesn't mean that MGTOWs can't love a woman. Doesn't mean that MGTOWs don't have sex. Doesn't mean that MGTOWs don't date. It doesn't, and there's no such thing as like level 1000 MGTOW. One of the things that we like to joke about, me, TFM, some of the older MGTOWs, we always joke that. Have you ever heard of Dragon Ball Z?
Hmm.
In Dragon Ball Z, there's this thing like how there's this thing with power levels. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And we always joke. I don't know if it was Turd who said this that you can't be Super Saiyan MGTOW. You can't be MGTOW level 1000, MGTOW level 9000. There's no such thing. For example, if I'm a MGTOW who says, I go on dates, I enjoy having relationships with women, I like having sex. And I say I'm a MGTOW monk, and I don't have sex, and I don't have relationships. That doesn't make me more of a MGTOW or an expert on MGTOW than a person who does have relationships with women, who does have sex, who uh, who's just who loves women. It doesn't change any of that. MGTOW is just a basic, very basic philosophy. It's a basic set of ideas, and even the word MGTOW doesn't mean a whole lot because you can take away the word MGTOW. MGTOW just describes the behavior, the philosophy, the ideas, but that's all that it is. That's the beauty of what MGTOW is, and there's no such thing as choosing to have more relationships or no relationships at all with women. That doesn't make you more or less MGTOW, and there's no factor in hating women either. There are some men who hate women in MGTOW. There are some men who don't hate women, just like people who don't call themselves MGTOW, and there are a lot of men who have relationships with women and they get married and they hate women, but they have relationships because they want sex or whatever. But again, it's the exact same thing. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before we went online. I'm sorry, am I echoing?
You are echoing a bit.
Mm. Mm. Okay, let me put on headphones. Maybe that will help. Sorry. Is this any better?
Yeah, that's definitely better.
Okay. Yeah. So, like I was saying before we went live, when I was saying that like MGTOWs are like feminists, if a guy just doesn't want to get married, doesn't want to have a relationship or kids, and wants to focus on himself, I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with that. I think a lot of what I was talking about before, like on our first stream, was the the attitude that some MGTOW have, where they like to just group genders and say very derogatory things about women, just like some third wave extreme feminists do the same for men. So that's kind of my like if I had to critique MGTOW, what I have a problem with. But if like you said, not all MGTOW are the same. And since we've talked, a lot of MGTOW have contacted me being like, hey, you know, the impression that you got isn't right. Like it's about this, it's about self-improvement. It's just a philosophy. And, you know, if that's the case, then I don't have an issue with it. Like, I think people should be free to do whatever they want. If they want to focus on self-improvement outside of relationship, I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, you have to remember that when it comes to ideologies, and I'll admit to it, with many ideologies, an ideology often gets defined by its the very most radical portion of its base. Can you
Hmm.
agree to that a bit?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the things I definitely say can come across as really extreme. And, you know, it's funny because when I say some things, I don't necessarily think a lot of them are going to happen, but people take it, you know, very seriously. And it's funny because these are the things that people end up hearing. People hear me say things like, you know, I want a all male utopia, but they don't hear things where another MGTOW says, you know, MGTOW is just about men and women. It's just about men focusing on a passion and choosing not to marry or have children. But I like there's a guy named No Holds Bar. He likes going out with women. He likes having relationships. MGTOW 101. He loves having relationships with women. He doesn't have a girlfriend, but he does date actively. There's some very big MGTOW content producers who still have relationships. At one point, Sandman, maybe a year or two ago, he was dating for a while, and that didn't make them any less of MGTOWs. You know, there's some MGTOWs who become kind of purist. You know, when you spend so much time, I guess you could say, going your own way, you start to define it around your own core beliefs, and you can become a bit locked into your own way of thinking. That's one thing that I found when I was, you know, as a MGTOW monk. It becomes very easy to start saying, you know what, this is the way it should be, this is the way it is, and you can become a little one track minded if you isolate yourself a little too much. That is one of the things that MGTOW do have to be aware of. It's good to have solitude. It's good to have space for yourself, but it is not. But you do have, like, for me, I had to learn that myself, is that you can't isolate yourself from the world, because then you start to lose connection with it and others.
Hmm.
Do you have a
Yeah.
fan in the background? Are you outside?
No. I'm trying to. I have a mic, and currently I can go get a different mic if it's really that bad. I mean, I can't tell, so if you want me to do that, just let me know.
It's okay right now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a good philosophy to have, and definitely, like, I mean, you know, I guess I'm sort of in the anti-feminist sphere of things, and I know there are anti-feminists out there who definitely don't speak for me. You know, they say some pretty crazy stuff, and a lot of it is, yeah, you know, if you're talking to people you know who already agree with you, you can kind of be a bit more outrageous. But you know, since we had our talk last time, I actually did get like quite a bit of MGTOW traffic on my channel. Some of it was positive, some of it was negative, and you know, something that I you know, for your MGTOW audience to understand, um, you know, a lot of them are criticizing me like, oh, you say you stand for equality, but you know, you don't really want equality, and it's yeah, I don't know. I don't get that assumption that I'm lying about actually wanting equality. And I know it's coming from the assumption that as a woman I want to protect privilege, but I think that there's kind of a misunderstanding of what feminism is versus like what equality is versus what women are. Because I mean, as a woman, I don't have any really inherent beliefs that I share with other women, you know? So I think there's a little bit of like just classifying all women as the same.
There's a lot of distrust. You know, there's a lot of distrust. I mean, think about a lot of the things that have happened to men, and you know, you talk about some of the things. You have to realize that there are a lot of men who have been hurt by feminism. There's a lot of men who are downright afraid of trusting a woman. Trust and You know, I'll tell you something funny. I was surprised when I first messaged you. I hope you don't mind me talking about this. When I first messaged you to set up the interview, you not the interview to set up this chat. This is not an interview, but to set up this friendly chat, you said no initially.
Mhm.
And why did you say no initially?
Well, so for context, I did see, well, someone messaged me about it, and then I did watch like the follow-up video you did after our initial chat, and you said some very not nice things about me. And even on the stream itself, I felt like there wasn't much attempt at understanding. And I think that was I admit, like, that was a weird instance when we first talked together. Like, you had been in the middle of responding to me, and then I came on, so it was like a weird situation for both of us. Like, we were not expecting to do that sort of thing. But yeah, so like, I just kind of felt like, well, you've been telling me all women are the same. I guess you have an opinion. You're somewhat of a person, like that kind of thing. So I just felt like, if there's no respect there, we can't really have a constructive dialogue. But then you kind of explained to me, like, hey, like, this isn't, like, it just wasn't a good situation. Like, I was tired. Like, we both, it just wasn't good. So, you showing that, hey, like, let's actually try to do this. Like, yeah, that made me kind of reconsider. It's like, all right, well, if he actually wants to have a conversation, it would be kind of, I would be the bad guy in that situation, to have just say no because, reasons. So I don't know. I try to have the mind that if someone wants to talk, I should be willing to listen. So
it was actually surprising for me the way you responded, because okay, it's definitely purring the background.
okay, wait. Is this any better?
It's a little better now. It's definitely better. Yes.
Okay. Yes. I just got my mic. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I was actually surprised. Let me, there's this thing in MGTOW. You did tell me that you do know Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did you ever watch Blonde's video Overcoming Beta Male Qualities?
Mm-hmm.
Have you've seen that video?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of MGTOWs think that women are one-track minded, and you have to essentially assert dominance, and they're always playing a game. And when I was initially speaking to you, I approached you from the context that you're just like all other women. You're just playing a game. You're not serious about any of this, and that was on me.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started trying to talk to you, I realized that this isn't working. Coming at you from the aspect of coming at you from the position of trying to, I don't know, I don't use the word manipulate, but trying to be using a dominant, like, you know what, damn you, or whatever. It wasn't working with you. So I tried coming at you from a point of rationality and reason, especially after I watched the video you did with, was that the founder of PragerU?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dennis Prager is a cool guy.
So yeah, after I saw that, I noticed that you pride yourself on being rational, reasonable, collected, and looking at different points of view. So once I saw that, I said, well, let me approach you from a more rational perspective. And I was really surprised that you kind of, like, as soon as I did that, you kind of mellowed out a little bit. And you even said, you understood, and we were able to set something up. And honestly, like I said, I was really surprised by your response, because there were actually some MGTOWs that were saying, angry, you lost the debate. You should have simply told her to shut up and go make a sandwich. And again, so I don't know, maybe it's culture. You said that you weren't raised in America. Is that right?
No, yeah, I wasn't. I grew up in Hong Kong and like a little bit in Shanghai and Singapore. So.
Okay. So again, this is the difficult thing, Roaming. For many of us MGTOW, we only know American women, or we only know American culture. So your behavior, your personality, just the way that you conduct yourself, the way that you respond, the fact that you respond to rationality versus dominance, or American, what we call gaming. It was different. And again, it leaves me to believe that maybe that not all women are necessarily like that. And that's something that which is so you have to understand, that's a very big thing for a MGTOW to say that not all women are necessarily like that. So
yeah, and I appreciate that, really, because I mean that I don't know how well it came across, but that was kind of, you know, what I was sort of upset about in our first talk, was the idea of like, because, you know, I hate those blue-haired, like pierced face people protesting in the streets dressed up as vaginas. And so like I think part of that was just me being upset that I was being grouped in with that. So yeah, you know, I appreciate that you're kind of at least not, you know, classifying me with them, because I think, you know, if MGTOW and anti-feminists were to come together, we would have a lot in common, at least about, you know, this regressive sort of anti-male aspect our culture is taking. So yeah, I appreciate that.
have you ever, I'm sure you've watched Lauren Southern videos, right?
I mean, not all of them, but like I know who she is and I have seen her videos.
What do you think of Lauren?
From what I've seen, I mean, I've really only seen some of the things she's done with Rebel. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't have anything against her, I guess. I don't know too much about her personal beliefs. I've just kind of seen her part where she went to the government and registered as a man. I've seen some of her on the street reporting during protests, that sort of thing.
Do you think she comes across as a very intellectual or intelligent person?
I think her role as, like, I think she probably is intellectual, but I think her role is more of a, I don't want to say provocateur, but like, yeah, it's kind of sensationalist because she is a journalist working for a media company.
So, for example, being how do I put this? Being on YouTube, you have to have a certain amount of, you have to have certain linguistic skills. So you have to be able to talk, you have to be able to speak, you have to be able to think off the top of your head, and it shows your level of intelligence, I think, when you're having a general conversation like this versus when you're reading off a teleprompter. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, I don't, Lauren, for example, I don't want to insult her, but whenever I've watched her outside of Rebel Media, she doesn't come across as very intelligent. She doesn't really come across as someone who really has anything of value to say. I've seen her on other channels. I've seen her in, small snippets, and she has almost nothing to say when she doesn't have a teleprompter in front of her, when she doesn't have cue cards in front of her. She has almost nothing of value to say. And that often says a lot about her, where you said it earlier, where, it's very sensationalized with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's literally there's no level of chill with her. It's always literally trying to get attention, constant attention. Why the hell would you go and change your gender just to show that you could do it? It feels like she's more interested in getting people to look at her, to see her, than actually having a real conversation about these issues.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, well, she works for Rebel Media, so I don't know if you've seen their other stuff. And I think part of her shtick is, or their shtick is, that they just want to draw attention to the craziness. They're not really social or political commentators. They're just sort of like, look at this, look how crazy and ridiculous these feminists are being, sort of thing. So I don't think it's necessarily bad or good, but it is definitely a different type of content than someone like, I don't know, Ben Shapiro, who actually takes these arguments and then debunks them point by point.
Right. And a lot of it is entertaining, and you have to admit that there's a financial aspect to what they do as well.
Oh, I mean, definitely. Rebel Media is a company.
Yeah. So, a lot of MGTOWs don't think that there are women who actually want to necessarily change anything. They don't necessarily, they're not very serious about changing things. For example, I've watched the video where Lauren literally says things along the lines of, she will, say that objectifying women isn't right, except when she says it's wrong, or, she'll start, bashing men and talking poorly of guys who tried to talk to her in a bar. And you look at certain things along the lines and you think, wait a minute, you're saying these things about how women behave in society, and then on the other hand, you're chastising men doing the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are you really trying to do? What are you really trying to say? Are you really open-minded? Because do you really want social change? First and second wave feminism have been pretty radical in their own senses, and the way that women went about getting those benefits in first and second wave feminism, they got a lot of rights, they got a lot of privileges, but they did not get equal responsibilities. And I think a lot of MGTOWs want to hear equal responsibility, and a lot of MGTOWs we would want balance, and we don't really see that. We don't, and it's easy for a lot of people to say, we want change, we don't support these things, but what is the likelihood of any change actually happening?
Well, I think you bring up a good point where, in society today, women still are privileged, and a lot of, the anti-feminism stuff, it's not necessarily focused on equality. It can just be focused on, oh, we shouldn't hate on men. And I do think there should be more of a focus on actually, let's say getting rid of some of these privileged women have. I think if you draft men, I think you should also have to draft women. I think, if you're going to give men these prison sentences, you should also give them to women. And, that is a fair critique of the anti-feminist movement. I think if we because we all like to claim that we're egalitarians, right? And I think if we really mean that, then more time should be spent addressing female privileges than is currently being done. I would agree with that.
Okay. It honestly feels like, that's where a lot of MGTOWs get really pissed off. A lot of time is not spent being addressing female privileges. You have all these anti-feminists saying, some of them are saying, oh, it's horrible what's happening to men here, it's horrible what's happening to men there, but they're not actually trying to address the female privileges because they don't want to lose those privileges. And can you admit that there are some anti-feminists that do walk that line?
I mean, I'm sure there must be. Again, I can't really speak to Lauren Southern specifically, her motivations. I've liked what I've seen so far. I mean, I haven't seen everything she's done, but I mean, I can see that, yeah, maybe there are women out there. And actually, I think I have seen women out there they for equality, but no, don't draft women. I think that is hypocritical. And, on my own page, I got, MGTOWs commenting what have you done for men's rights? And, I've made videos about male privilege and, the effects of fatherless homes, how important men are in children's lives. But I'll admit, I could be doing more. If I actually do care about men's rights as an egalitarian, I could be doing more. And that is something that I would like to focus on my channel.
Mm-hmm. It goes deep. I mean, there's, like I said, a part of it is a distrust. There's a woman I made a video about, I forget her name, but she was a feminist. She's a cam model, and evidently she may have actually been a sex worker as well.
Is a cam model what is that exactly?
You ever heard of Chatterbait?
Oh, okay, yeah, got it. Sorry, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so she's a cam model, and she makes her money off webcams, but she has a fairly popular channel on YouTube, maybe 40,000 subscribers. And the channel was originally very focused around feminism, and most of the videos that made her channel popular were about feminism. And then suddenly she made a video last year, I think around August, saying, I'm no longer a feminist, and that's it. And she wanted to have no discussion about why she's no longer a feminist. She just wanted to no longer be called a feminist. She wanted to be completely disassociated. Her name is actually Lexi Nichelle. That's her name, Lexi Nichelle. And if you look at her, she has green hair, tattoos. I think she has a pole in her bedroom, a stripper pole. And it's just funny, the feminists are attacking the feminists. She doesn't like how they speak to her now, or the way that they called her something like whore shaming, because, and she doesn't like that. But she's trying to disassociate herself entirely with feminism, wherein she built her entire career and her presence on YouTube behind feminism. And it's now she wants to reject feminism because feminism has been mean to her. Feminists are controlling the things that she can say, the things that she can do. don't, how hypocritical does that sound, where feminism now is making your life miserable, so now feminism is bad, and you also want to have nothing to do with it. You don't want to be called a feminist anymore. You're deleting the videos, feminist videos on your channel, and you want people to just like forget about that you were ever a feminist. And then MGTOWs look at things like that and say, yeah, this is why you can't trust a woman. And again, I know you're going to say, well, that's like so generalized. That's generalizing because, that's one specific woman. But it's just like for a lot of MGTOWs, there's a lot of guys who've seen their fathers go through, the divorce courts. They've had their own experiences with narcissistic women, and are they just turning on the television and you see some guy being treated like crap by a woman, or being ostracized by society. And I think that after, it's like becoming an echo chamber in society, where you're just constantly being bombarded with men being abused in society, and women I don't even want to say, not forget about empathy, there's highlighting their narcissism, so many of them, that a lot of guys just start thinking all women are like that, all women do come across like that. I mean, it's for a lot of MGTOWs, it's hard to move beyond that, which is why I said, like, it's a big thing for me to say, maybe not all women are like that when you look at it from your perspective. But keep in mind, even if you're a very extraordinary woman, I think that there are some extraordinary women out there. Maybe you're just one of the extraordinary women, but it doesn't change the fact that a lot of women are very narcissistic, if you will understand that, without me trying to insult all women.
No, and see that I understand and I can agree with, like the idea that many women today are very narcissistic. I completely agree with that, and I think it does come from this place of privilege. And actually, my mother just sent me this meme. She's been somewhat red pilled too, and I actually kind of love it. But it's this woman from like the early 2000s. Oh, I don't need to cook. I'm not going to clean. Like I can do things my own way. And then you look at them now, and they're like, where are all the men? Why aren't I getting dates? So I think that there is this attitude of entitlement, and yeah, you could say narcissism, that I think regressive feminism has really pushed on women, and they've been really successful doing it. But yeah, I would definitely say that it's not all women. And I think, there are more and more female anti-SJW creators or anti-feminist creators that are out there, Cassara Vera, a bit of Brit. I mean, everybody knows Shoe on Head, but I think feminism still very much has a grip on a lot of young women, but I think we're starting to see somewhat of a change and somewhat of a backlash, just because they've gotten so ridiculous. I think women can buy into this whole concept of privilege, and kind of like light misandry for some, extreme for others, up until a point where it just becomes too much. And, they kind of realize, wow, this is a ridiculous ideology that I've bought into. Maybe I need some self-reflection.
You do realize that as feminism crashes and burns, and it's crashing and burning pretty hard right now, you do realize that there are going to be more and more anti-feminists popping up, and there are going to be a lot of people coming in just for the sake of making money, getting attention, and just a lot of these will be the same people who were a moment ago had beliefs that men were toxic or they were pushing for feminism. A lot of them are going to come in and literally invade your space now. You do realize that?
Well, I mean, I realize that, but at the same time, like, we're going to have to take people, case by case, because I'm sure there are, some people out there who they don't really care. I mean, they haven't really put a lot of thought either way into what they believe in. They just kind of, go with the flow. Hey, this is what people on Facebook are posting. I agree. So I have no doubt that will happen. But, on my channel, I've also gotten comments from people who actually used to be feminism, but now really have changed their minds because, they've kind of, I don't want to say seen the light, but sort of. So yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a mix. I think there will definitely be some people who might capitalize on, hey, this is the current trend. This is what's cool. Because I think now when you make anti-feminist videos, it's kind of almost like it's too easy. There's like, I feel like, especially YouTube, like the anti-feminist, anti-SJW community is too big. We're like the majority now. So I think we're definitely getting to the point soon where, like you said, feminism is crashing and burning, and soon there aren't going to be that many people left that actually admit to being, this whole SJW sort of thing.
They won't admit to it, and then, like I said, it's going to become the new, feminist. A lot of it was about making money. Lots of these feminists, Anita Sarkeesian, she used feminism to make money, and she could really care less about women. There's a lot of feminists who've used feminism to make money. Can you agree on that?
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And the thing is, there's going to be a lot of those same people who will turn around and say, I saw the light. Now I can make some money exposing this stuff. I look at Casey J, who did the Red Pill movie. And I saw bits and pieces from the movie, but I suspect that by the end of the movie, she no longer wants to call herself a feminist, at least not a third wave feminist. And you have to like wonder, how sincere some of these people are, especially when they see the amount of interest and attention that they're getting. I mean, look at the presidential election, what happened with Donald Trump, where so much of the country voted for Donald Trump, and they did it they did it in privacy. Like, they went into the voting booth and they voted for Donald Trump, while the media, everyone was saying Donald Trump had no chance of winning. 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. 53%. That is very significant in the sense that it means a lot of women, especially white women who make up the largest group of women in the United States, disagreed with what's happening, and that's very suggestive of the of how people are actually feeling. But it's not. You have to question at the same time, you know why this is happening at this point. It just highlights that there's a major rejection of feminism at all levels, but no one's really talking about it. A lot of people are afraid to mention it. Something else I want to say is, a moment ago you brought up the whole, you agreed that there's a lot of narcissism among women today. Now, keep in mind, if a lot of women are so narcissist and a lot of men are aware of that, there's a lot of women who will also pretend that they're not extreme narcissists just to get a man. And then, you find out when it's too late. And
but I mean, to that, like, I think that's why you need to get to know people before, making these judgments on them, because it could, something that I heard growing up was like, careful, of those boys, they'll pretend to like you just to sleep with you or something like that. So that whole, let's say, tricking the other gender thing, it could go both ways. And I hope that the majority of people, men and women, don't think like that. I can't comment on to how many women would pretend to be one way to get, because I've definitely seen that happen. I know, a lot of friends where, their girlfriend seems great, and then 6 months later, the craze comes out. But yeah, I just don't think that it's, all women. And actually, like, something that you mentioned before, which I thought was really interesting, is that the majority of white women did vote for Trump. But, just looking, let's say, through Facebook, Twitter, the media, you would never have guessed that would have happened before the actual election itself. You would never have guessed how many women, at least white women, are rejecting this feminist mentality. But I think the thing is that, we talked about female nature last time, and how, how kind of dominant it is versus the, I don't want to say, like, personality aspects, right? What's ingrained and what's just kind of dependent on each person. Women in general do tend to be less outspoken about politics than men, which I think is a problem, because I think that's kind of reinforcing the idea that all women buy into this, because so many women who don't buy into this are afraid to speak out.
Well, here's the thing. You're right in some ways. No, you're definitely right. But then you can also think that there's some women who there's men can be more aggressive as well, in the sense that we can be more likely to actually talk about politics unless we feel too afraid to do so in society. There may also be some women who, when I was in college, I remember my history professor, he was a really great guy. He was actually, I forget if he was a congressman or just a councilman, but he had some position in the government at some point. But, he knew a lot about history. And one of the things that he said about history is that when it comes to people and the way that people behave in society, ultimately people vote for the person that they like. And when you look at how people voted for Donald Trump, it's highly suggestive that people trusted him more than they trusted Hillary Clinton. I think that that was a big issue during the election, that a lot of people didn't trust her, and they didn't trust the direction that the country was going in. And I think that that influenced very much the perception of the way things are going in America. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, for a lot of people, I don't think it's necessarily that they like Donald Trump. I think it was just that they didn't trust Hillary and they didn't like what Hillary was bringing to the table. This whole idea of, I don't know, like diversity. She's always talking about diversity, even though it meant nothing. The idea that she spoke for all women, like she was our messiah. Once she was president, it's like, okay, women, we've made it officially. Stuff like that. I think people saw through it. I think if we're talking examples of people hopping on the bandwagon of feminism just for their own success, I think Hillary Clinton is a perfect example of that. If you look at the things she's done to other women, especially like, some of Bill Clinton's mistresses, I don't think it can be argued that she actually stands for, women's rights and equality. So, yeah, I think the American people kind of saw through that.
I'm looking through the comments right now. Are you paying any attention to the live chat?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the more difficult things about MGTOW. For example, it's kind of give and take, because you're gonna find a variety of characters here. You're gonna find some people who enjoy but after we had the conversation, there are some people who said I should never have had you on this channel in the first place because you're a woman. There are other people who said they really respected the shit out of me because I had you on. And there's some people I just got some really crazy comments. I'm looking at one comment right now, and like there's a guy that's named Mortify that says, "Angry MGTOW, do you like this broad or something? Have you learned nothing from the previous stream?" This is it can be very difficult. That's why I tried to that's why I really wanted to get you back on the stream, because I wanted you to really understand you know what MGTOW was literally. It's I don't control the MGTOW philosophy. None of us control the MGTOW narrative. It's just it's a very basic those basic ideas of not getting married, not having children, focusing on your passions. That doesn't mean you dislike women, doesn't mean that you don't want to have necessarily anything to do with women. There's a lot of MGTOWs who have great female friends. There's a lot of MGTOWs who love their mothers. There's a lot of MGTOWs who, who spend considerable amounts of time with women, or, again, they don't share, they don't have any type of hatred. But then there are also MGTOWs who do hate women. But I mean, again, because of the nature of our community as well, I think that we will end up getting a lot of guys who've been hurt by women. And as some men go their own way, it becomes very easy to isolate themselves. I mean, that's something I don't want to use the word guilty of doing, but that's something that I've done for a long time. I mean, the last conversation, when I had the conversation with you previously, I had not spoken to, I hadn't had a long, in-depth conversation with a woman in years. So it was a little odd. Like I said, it was kind of like, what is this roaming girl trying to do? Is she trying to throw me through a loop? Does she have insidious,
Yeah.
But then if you look at the kind of comments that I have in the chat right now, some guys are saying the same thing. One guy was like, "You fucked up. She will never want your penis now." And I'm like, what?
I mean, okay, in your defense, I had Milo Stewart on my channel. I think it was a couple weeks ago, and I kind of got similar backlash from people, who were sub to me, how could you have this person on your channel? Does that mean you agree with them? But they said this, and I acknowledge that you having me on your channel doesn't mean that you agree with me. I don't think all of a sudden that you're not hardcore MGTOW because you're talking to me. I don't think that, and I appreciate that we're kind of both making this effort to talk to each other. So yeah, again, thank you for this. And I mean, I think a lot of people are going to appreciate that you've done this, because I think this whole experience has taught me a lot more about MGTOW. Like at first I saw your video about blonde, and I'd seen some, like one of your chats with Bering, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next video I saw, you were talking about me, and I was like, I went onto the channel and I was seeing all the things that the people were saying about me in the live chat. I was like, what, this is awful. And, same when we were streaming, and, all the comments on that. But then, a couple days after, I got a lot of comments from MGTOWs who were like, hey, you didn't get a good impression of what MGTOW was. It's actually this. And, they directed me to other channels, which I haven't had a chance to check out all of them. But, I think I do understand where MGTOW is coming from. And, as long as it's about self-improvement, and, I don't care if, this guy doesn't want to get married or have kids, like, that's fine. Again, like, it's really just what I perceive to be a sort of anti-woman streak that I'll be willing to admit not all MGTOW will have.
What I really want you to get out of this is to understand that you don't need to watch any of those other channels, because MGTOW, you don't even have to watch my channel to understand MGTOW. MGTOW is literally those three things. But after those three things, you're intelligent enough to say, well, there are some men who like women. There are some men who don't like women. There are some men who do bad. There are some men who rape. There are some men who don't rape. Just like there are some women who do this, and you try not to put all women in the same thing, in the same classification. That's the same thing with MGTOW. MGTOW is it's just those three things, but you don't need anyone to define MGTOW to you other than outside of those three things, because everyone is living their lives different ways. Every man is going his own way. He's making his life the way for him. So for example, there are a lot of MGTOWs who are minimalist. That's something that's very common among a lot of MGTOWs I've noticed. A lot of MGTOWs are minimalist, or many of them are preppers, but that doesn't mean all MGTOWs are preppers. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm. And, I get that. And I am trying to not generalize, but I think, a lot of people say that about feminism too. And I don't mean to keep comparing, because again, I'm not saying that all MGTOW are feminists, but I think the reason, as someone who's kind of, a social commentator activist, the reason why I call out feminism is because, I think that ideology that all men are bad, that women deserve privilege, I think that is a dangerous ideology. So the reason why I was interested in MGTOW and want to learn more about it is because I want to know if it's something that's actually dangerous or harmful to society. The type of thing you're describing, hey, men going their own way, I don't have a problem with that. But if it were, for example, something that actually was rooted in this idea that women are just these resource suckers that are awful, then I think that would be something worth commenting on. In that case.
Here's the thing. There's a lot of anger in MGTOW. My channel is called The Angry MGTOW. And there are going to be times when, I'll still say things, and some of it will be rooted in anger. But, again, part of my thing is that I try to be open-minded. I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to expand my thought process. And again, for a lot of us, it's going to take time before we move beyond the constraints of necessarily saying every woman is like that. When you heard about my all male utopia idea, what did you think?
I thought it was pretty crazy. The idea that society would be better without any woman or without any women. Not to mention how would that happen? Is it some sort of mass genocide plan? But yeah, I thought that was a pretty out there thought. The idea that you would dislike women so much you don't even want to live in the same society as them. Because that's definitely further than just going your own way, right? You don't even want them around.
Indeed. Here's the thing. There's a lot of us MGTOW. I have a video that said, is gender segregation our future? And in France right now, and in some places, even in the UK, because of the Muslim populations, there's a lot of gender segregation happening right now. There are areas where there's only young men, where Muslims have basically said, this is a man-only area. These are men-only establishments. We don't want to have anything to do with women. And from a MGTOW perspective, when relating that to how the whole utopia idea worked, we're not really violent towards women. My idea for the male utopia was essentially, after many generations, basically through the use of the artificial womb, we'd have only male children using skin cells from men, because men can evidently, skin cells and potentially other cells in the body can be used to produce egg cells and sperm cells. So you would just, only from men, by the way, so you could have children using just cells from men, from one man and from two different men. And over many generations, there'd be only boys born, but there wouldn't be girls born. And women would naturally just, die off now. And I figured that maybe that would be for the best, because if you look at female behavior, maybe a world without women, we would have less fighting, we would have more technological advancement, because women do make 85% of all consumer purchases. Even if some of those purchases are being made for families, it's still a significant are being made for women themselves. And so that means they're buying more stuff that they necessarily don't need, but won't, because women tend to acquire more things than men. You can agree to that.
Yeah, I think especially, in the West, there's in general a very consumerist mentality, and especially toward women.
Yeah. But, again, at the same time, I never actually thought that my utopia idea would potentially come to fruition. I think that part of my hope has been that maybe a part of it, I'm a troll to some degree. I do troll, and that should be very obvious. Some people ask, "Am I a Poe?" I am not a Poe, but I do like them saying I'm a Poe, because it keeps people wondering. You know what a Poe is, right?
Yeah, I've seen that used. Yeah, but I mean, I can appreciate some good trolling now and then. I do it too. So,
But the idea is kind of this. Like, for example, I always figure that part of some of the radical things I say, it kind of tells radical feminists or women who, you know, who think that men won't go to the point of pushing back. When you see a hashtag like kill all white men trending on Twitter, you start to think, what the hell are we seeing? Or kill all men. You're like, what the hell are we thinking? Do they think that men are just going to sit around and, that we don't have the same capacity to do things like that? You think we won't put up a hashtag that says a world without women? So part of it is like, for me, it's kind of like literally creating a little bit of a drama, creating a little bit of fear,
mhm.
and insinuating that, hey, we're just, we'll push things just as far as you'll push things. And I think that by doing that, sometimes it may make us look extremely radical, but it also highlights the fact that men will stand up for themselves. Men are willing to fight back, because there seems to be this notion that men have to be passive, be better than the feminist. But when you're fighting on a battlefield, if someone's coming at you with a sword, you can't just stand there and say, I'm going to be better than you. You have to fight back, and you have to fight back equally. It may not be pretty, it may be a bloody fight, but there are, when you're in a fight, in a real fight, you have to fight back.
And I agree that we should be fighting back about feminists. And when they say things like, I forget who that one feminist was that was saying, like, yeah, I think men should be reduced to 10% of the population and only kept in camps. I think we absolutely need to fight back against that mentality, because that is just, I mean, like, seriously, men concentration camps, that is absolutely horrible to say. But and I can appreciate the fact that some of this is reactionary, and I think even the anti-feminist, anti-SJW, that side, some of the things that we say or that other content creators say really only makes sense in the context of how extreme the feminists are being, because otherwise it just looks crazy. Like, all this name calling you're doing, that's crazy. Like, how aggressive you're being, that's crazy. And I can appreciate the fact that you have to understand the people that you're fighting against. Like, if it's an escalation, you kind of have to meet them at least halfway there, or otherwise you're just going to be spoken over. But again, I would say that feel free to attack the feminists all you want. It's just, I would appreciate it more if some MGTOW didn't feel the need to attack all women.
Part of it is anger. Again,
Yeah.
Part of it is anger, and like, I mean, I'm gonna have my rants every so often because, it can be as a guy, you can become really shell shocked. And I can kind of understand where some women come from. For example, when some women are in university, they go through these programs and they say, look to your left, look to your right. One of these women will be raped, and it's like, it's just, they dramatize everything so much, and it becomes like it comes this thing where you're literally, a lot of women start thinking that they are victims because they're told that they're victims. And with MGTOW, we end up getting surrounded by statistics so much. For example, this many, let's say 75 to 85% of all homeless people are men, and 90% of over 90% of all the on the job deaths are going to be men, and women trigger something like 60 to 70% of all divorces, and in child custody cases, women are awarded to children between 80 and 90% of the time. And when you start seeing these statistics and you start hearing from men who've lived these lives and who have suffered, and they come to MGTOW, you start to get the impression that all women are like that, and you're going to get attacked. You're going to lose your livelihood if you have anything to do with a woman. You're going to be destroyed. You're going to have everything taken away from you. It's again, like I said, I did not expect your response. I expected you to be a lot more narcissistic. So again, it's confusing for a lot of guys because after you become shell shocked, so you develop this attitude. It's like a survival instinct. You classify all women as being like that, and I don't know. I don't have an answer on how MGTOWs can work through that, because part of me, on one hand, I'm talking to you right now, and I don't honestly think you're entirely like that. Obviously, you're still a girl, but I don't think you're necessarily a bad person. But I do think that, like you said, a lot of women are narcissistic. So, you say get to know people, but there's a lot of MGTOW who have gotten to know a woman. They've been married to a woman for like 20 years, and then she just snaps on them and takes everything and gets a divorce. I mean, you've heard stories like that as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I can understand, when people have been hurt, especially if it's been multiple times, especially if they see what they think is a pervasive anti-male bias in society. I can appreciate where this bitterness is coming from. But, I think a lot of it could also be, the woman who's been beaten by her boyfriend, who's been raped, who's been, abused and stuff like that. She might have the same reaction toward men, which I think is where a lot of this anti-male stuff is probably coming from. There probably are men out there who have wronged these women, just like there are definitely women out there who have wronged these MGTOW, probably in really meaningful and hurtful ways. And so I think what you're doing is great. Like, I think I really appreciate, despite the fact that you have these feelings, that you're willing to talk to me. And I think, we in the anti-feminist community, I think something we can do, or just women in general who don't, I guess, call themselves feminists, something that we can do in order to kind of help this situation is to be more vocal about speaking up against those types of women, the people who would do that, right? Because, it's kind of like, not only is this stuff happening, there's not enough people speaking out about it. So it's almost like they agree with it, right?
That's exactly how a lot of MGTOWs feel. Like, if you don't say anything, then you kind of agree with it, don't you? So
right.
Even if you don't.
Yeah. So I think, as a woman who doesn't think like that, yeah, I think it should be on me to speak up against something if I see it happening and I think it's wrong. And I think, it just comes down to, I think people in general need to be more willing to speak up for their beliefs and to, identify when something's wrong and try to fix it, which sadly, I don't think is happening. But I mean, yeah, again, I would just say treat people as individuals. Like, I'm sure there are tons of women out there who you wouldn't even necessarily know disagree with these things unless you actually get to know her and ask her about them specifically.
I have a question for you, and I agree with what you're saying. I did invite you on for more than just debate. This is more than a debate. What is your opinion on, you said that you grew up in Hong Kong for quite a few years, right?
Yeah, I was about 10 when we moved to China.
Okay, let me ask. So, if you don't mind answering, were you born in America?
No,
Were you born in China?
I was born in Canada. Okay, my dad is Chinese and my mom is Canadian. I was born in Canada, and then when I was a couple months old, we moved to Hong Kong, lived there for 10 years, then moved to Shanghai. So, and then I came to the States for university.
How long have you been in the States?
It's about 4 years total, 4 or 5 years.
Wait a minute. So you were
I
you
went to
were
international schools, if that's why you're wondering why I sound like the way I do.
yes,
Yeah, so I went to international school. So I like my classmates were British, French, from all over.
but you do speak Chinese.
Hmm.
Okay. So you do
Chinese New
understand
Year
that.
coming up, by the way. Exciting. Sorry, go ahead.
So you okay? So you are familiar with the concept of leftover women.
No.
You've
What do you
never
mean by
heard of the
that?
left. So
No.
in China, okay. So in China, they have a group of women called the leftover women. I actually put out a video. It was either yesterday, I think it was last night. I put out a video discussing the leftover women in China, and Chinese feminists basically were talking about the leftover women, women who have hit 27 years old and they can't find relationships anymore. No man wants them. You should probably Google it. But yeah, it's such a popular term that it's actually been added to the official lexicon in China right now. But the reason why I brought up the leftover woman is I wanted to ask you about the attitudes towards feminism in China and the attitudes that women have in Asia versus the attitudes that women have in America. Do you notice, is there a difference in the narcissism, the materialism, and the way women see and perceive men?
I would say that. So I was 16 when I left Asia and came to the States for university. So I wasn't very politically active while I was there. But just in terms of general social attitudes, I have a shocking amount of friends here that say things like they don't want to get married, they never want to have children, stuff like that. And I never heard that growing up in Asia. That's just something that wasn't done. I think women there tend to be more, and again, like I hate to generalize, but just, it's true. Women over there tend to be more family oriented and more focused on, yeah, getting married and having children. And I think that's just something that's really prominent in Asian culture overall.
Do you think that the relationships are stronger in in terms of women are less likely to want a divorce. They're
Oh,
more.
definitely. Because, and I think there's this attitude in the West where like, if you don't like something, you return it. Or if something doesn't work for you, then it's no good. And I think that kind of mentality is very toxic to families in general, because I think, like a human being is not someone you can just return if they've done something wrong to like make you mad and you don't like them anymore or something like that. Like that's not how families work. But I think that's how more and more, I think it's because of how easy it is to get divorced in the United States. I think that's the kind of culture that's being brought.
What do you think's going? I mean, as feminism is dying, kicking and screaming right now, I've coined a word recently. I don't know if I'm the first person to ever use it, but I coined a word called the she session. And there's a lot of things happening in the US right now. For one, this year McDonald's is going to be rolling out kiosks to all 14,000 of their locations, which means that when people enter a McDonald's, they'll be able to order their food using a machine, and the people and the cashiers will no longer be necessary. I don't know if you've seen Amazon Go. Have you seen Amazon Go?
Hmm.
So Amazon Go is, for those who don't know, it's essentially you can walk into any store, you can walk into an Amazon grocery store. There's no cashiers. You pick up what you want and then you walk out, and everything is handled using sensors and your cell phone. Now they're saying that the technology may actually end up being licensed out to places like Walmart and to other supermarkets. That might be the real ultimate purpose. And even when it comes to places like Chase is actually reducing their workforce. They reduced their workforce quite significantly last year. We didn't even notice because of all the presidential drama, but they're actually pushing to replace bank tellers with ATMs, literally replacing putting ATMs at the windows where bank tellers once occupied, and only having one teller in these banks that are mostly for business transactions. And the reason why I say this is it feels like the options available to women are being minimized. I mean, even in the United States, the government is one of the biggest employers of women. Did you know that?
Hmm.
Did you know that Donald Trump just put a hiring freeze on on hiring any new federal employees, even vacant positions? Were you aware of that?
I wasn't aware of that. I think that's a good idea, though. I think the government's too big.
Okay, but think about that. If women predominantly go towards government jobs and he put a hiring freeze, and the only jobs that you can now fill are going to be military, infrastructure, and homeland security, in that those are jobs that are predominantly male. He's also going to begin cutting back on subsidized housing through Section 8. He's also going to be cutting back on food stamp programs. He said that people shouldn't be living on food stamps for 10 years. They're there to help you get back on your feet, not for you to live off them for the rest of your life.
I agree with all those things.
The thing is, as it feels like there's going to be fewer options for women. Women are going to have to pay more for healthcare. They're going to have less government handouts and our entitlements. And as things change for women, I think that women are going to experience a type of she-cession in many ways, where they're not going to have the same privileges that they enjoyed, and there's going to be a lot of suffering. What do you think? How do you think that we can get things? Is there a way to get things back on track between men and women, or a balance in society? And I know it's a very broad question, because I've thought about it plenty of times. And one of the reasons why I say some of the things I do say is because I just don't see a way going forward where men and women, at least in our generations, can get along. And by the way, it sounds like you're right around 20. Is that correct?
I'm 22.
22. Okay. So
yeah. So the thing is that I think, I don't think gender relations are as bad as, a lot of MGTOW through their own personal experiences would believe. I have very healthy relationships with all the men in my life. And I think for the majority of people, it is that way. But, in terms of the fact that there is inequality between the genders, which is, causing some frictions, I think there needs to be a cultural change, and that comes from people actually standing up to the feminist ideology that has become so mainstream, especially in the media. Like, any TV show, pretty much any mainstream news outlet, they all have this very feminist social justice slant that is geared toward women, right? I mean, I think like that's pretty obvious. So that needs to change. And then I think things like Trump is doing to get rid of those like government entitlements and privileges that do tend to benefit women more. I think that's good. And I think it'll force women to be more independent. Like, I actually want to see independent women. I don't want to see women who are, sitting at home collecting welfare checks and on food stamps. And I think, women having to get out into the workforce and actually have to be self-reliant is going to be good for everybody.
Now, you said something very important a moment ago. You said you don't think that gender relations are as bad as MGTOWs think they are.
Right.
Because our perception is that gender relations are very, very bad. They did studies, and for example, there's a San Diego study that found that our generation of millennials are having less sex than any previous generation. The Generation X and the baby boomers, we're having less sex than even our grandparents. They've also found that
less sex measured how? Because I also read a study that said that, on average, high schoolers are losing their virginity later and later over the past like 10, 15 years. I think that's a good thing. So I'm not sure how like, are they measuring sex in relationships, outside of relationships? Like, because I'm not just for like promiscuity.
No. So they were talking about people, millennials, so people above the age of 18. They were saying that people above the age of 18 are having less sex in general compared to their parents. So people even in their 20s are having less sex.
Hmm.
And, that does kind of highlight, if people are having less sex, then, how are gender relations actually going?
Well, I don't think sex is a great, like, I think less sex outside of committed long-term relationships is actually a good thing, because it's gonna, lead to less things like fatherless homes, or unwanted pregnancies and stuff like that.
Hmm. So, in your opinion, gender relations are not as bad. I
And
mean,
and that's not to say that they're amazing, or they're not, you know, declining, but I don't think they're catastrophic. I don't think we're at the point where men and women can't get along together. I don't think that.
can you agree that there's a lot of men who are angry with women, or are frustrated?
It depends on what you mean by a lot. And I think that hopefully any man that is frustrated, or most men that are frustrated with like the things you've identified, the narcissism, the privilege, I hope that they would realize that it's not all women. It's just this kind of regressive feminism. And I think, my channel, it's something like 80% male subscribers. So I think men are very aware of the gender imbalances that exist, but I don't think most men attribute it specifically to women and not to the ideology that's behind it. Like it's the ideology that's responsible, not the gender.
Honestly, I think after talking, I think maybe it's somewhere. I think that you underestimate and maybe I overestimate. If that sounds,
Maybe.
if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
so, I mean, it could be that in some ways. And I mean, again, maybe there is some middle ground, but you know, uh, if it were up to me, honestly, I don't. Now that I've had a meal and I got some sleep, I'm more more mellow today. Someone referred to me as less angry, more mellow MGTOW. And you know, honestly, I don't necessarily want a world where there are no women, but in my perspective, I came to the conclusion that there was no hope for us ever being able to work the situation out. But I will admit that if you look at how the way feminism has worked, and the way the left has worked, I mean, there was this whole thing in the West, before the election, that the world was coming to an end. Did you get that at all?
That the world was coming to an end?
There were a lot of people who felt like the world was coming to an end, with the whole election. Like it
Oh,
was
you mean the people who were literally shaking, those people?
people in jet. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and then it didn't end, and now things are kind of calming down a bit. Well, at least kind of for some people.
Yeah. And I mean, like, me saying that gender relationships aren't catastrophic doesn't mean I don't want them to get better, right? Like, I definitely don't think they're as bad as you seem to think they are, but that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in improving them.
Okay. So I've definitely asked a lot of questions, and you were very gracious about answering them. I think we covered a lot of great ground. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to ask.
I actually have to get going about now, but
Okay,
yeah.
awesome. Awesome. All right. So definitely want to thank you for coming on, Roaming. And I think this chat went a lot better than the other one. Can you agree on that?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for having me back on.
Guys, hope you enjoyed this podcast with Roaming. Definitely check out our channel. I have a link to her channel in the description, so you can get a world view of what's happening. So I want to thank Roaming again for being on. If you enjoyed the video, definitely hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and just remember that all roads lead to MGTOW or death.